Welcome to Ignite. Hello, my name is Pastor Josh. I'm the youth pastor here. Hey, how about we do our lesson from the top of Pilot Butte, huh? Would that be cool? So, this is the last Wednesday of our shutdown for this time around. Hopefully it won't happen again. But next week we're going to be back together at the church behind the building. We're going to have a barbecue with food for everybody. We're going to have 9 Score Up and volleyball. We're just going to play some games together, hang out, and have a good time. So I hope you can join us. That's going to be next Wednesday at 6:30. Hey, don't forget about summer camp either. We have just a really cool trip planned, our road trip for the end of July. It's only $200 for a 4-night trip is a steal. We're going to go backpacking. We're going to go visit a mall. We're going to go do some outreach projects to help people in the Vancouver, Portland community. And we're going to be on the road. Sometimes with these trips, the funnest part of the whole thing is just being on the road, doing games in the car, hanging out with friends. And we're going to be talking about this trip for a long time. If $200 is a lot, or you got a bunch of siblings that want to go, talk to me, email me, and that's at pastorjosh@bennaz.org. We have some scholarship funds that can help you out too, but don't miss out, especially for money reasons. We want to get you there because you're going to remember this trip. So we've been in our series called Anger Issues. This is week 2 of Anger Issues, and last week we talked about how the things that we love are connected to what we get angry at. And so it's really important to understand how the things that we love flows out in anger. And when our loves are messed up or are out of the right priority, or especially when we love things more than God, it shows in how we express our anger. And so getting our love in the right position, our affections in the right position, is a great way to develop a healthy use of anger in our lives. Now this week, we're going to dig a little deeper into understanding anger in our own lives and learning to use it in a healthy way. But to start out, I want to pray, and then we're going to jump into a few Bible verses. So, Father, we just thank you for this time. We thank you for this beautiful land that we get to live in, God, all the cool stuff to do outside and the mountains. We just pray that you would bless your word as it's spoken, that you would speak to us, change our hearts, help us to use our anger in a way that honors you. We love you so much. Thank you for this community. Please bring us back together next week and bless this time. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let's check out a couple of these verses. So the first one is in Proverbs, and this is the Amplified Version. It's Proverbs 16:32. It says, "He who is slow to anger is better and more honorable than a mighty soldier. And he who rules and controls his own spirit is better than he who captures a city." Now notice in this Proverbs, it doesn't say he who is without anger. It doesn't say that you shouldn't have anger. It says he who uses their anger in the right way, who has control over their anger and over their own spirit. So we're going to look at how to take control of our anger and our own spirit. This other Proverbs 25:28 says this: "A person without self-control is like a city with walls that are broken down." A person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls. Now, if you've ever seen a movie like Lord of the Rings or some medieval type movie where there's castles and there's wars and there's battles, it's like back then in medieval times and going back to Bible times, there's wars all the time. There's armies marching. They're trying to take over cities, take over countries. And so walls are extremely important. Walls help you sleep at night because they protect you from dangers on the outside. And of course, some of these castles had massive fortified walls that would keep the people safe. And what the proverb is trying to say is that when we don't control our anger, when we don't use our anger the right way, our lives are like a city that has no wall. And we are vulnerable to things coming in and destroying relationships, destroying our future, destroying our ambitions, destroying our heart and our spirit. And so we're not safe. We're in a dangerous place if we can't control our anger. So let's just look at a couple ways that we can begin to understand our own anger and what to do with it. All right, so a lot of this sermon is based on some material from a pastor named Tim Keller. I'm going to put that link in the description so you guys can listen to that sermon if you want. It's a great sermon. It's a pretty deep sermon. But I just want to let you know that a lot of the stuff that I learned came from that. And we're going to do it kind of our Ignite way with a game with our fingers. So 5 fingers up, we're going to play fingers down. They've been doing this on TikTok. But we're going to add a spin that we do for Ignite, which is to write on our hand as we go through the sermon. So I want you to find a pen that you can write on your hand with. Now, if you don't want it to be permanent, don't be grabbing a Sharpie or something like that. If you want to be able to wash it off, grab a pen that you can wash it off. And also, as always, grab your journal, have a pen to take notes with, but we're going to be writing on our hands. And the way the game works on TikTok is that you say, put a finger down if you've done this thing. And our version is about anger. If this thing has angered you, put a finger down, okay? So the first one is you're playing a video game and you're at a really important part, right? You're beating a boss, you're playing online with your friends and you're against the other team and you're right at the end and your mom says, it's time to shut it down, time for dinner, something like that. You need to go to bed, shut it down now. If that has happened and made you angry, put a finger down. Have you had that happen? Okay, what about this one? You post something, put yourself out there on social media, maybe it's a phrase, maybe it's a picture, and the trolls come out and start attacking you and start putting it down, calling you names. Maybe it's even a friend. Hopefully it's not a friend, but maybe it's someone you know that starts going after you. It's so frustrating. Put a finger down. Okay, let's say you're at your favorite restaurant and they give you your order and they don't take off that thing that you hate and you need them to take off. Like for me, I order burgers without pickles. I don't like pickles on my burgers. And sometimes the restaurant will put the pickles on anyways and it's like, oh. Now fortunately, pickles are pretty easy to take off, so not a huge deal, but still a little frustrating. How about this one? You're in class taking a test and the teacher puts questions on the test that you didn't study in class. It wasn't in the reading, it wasn't in the lectures, and you're looking at that test and you're just going, what on earth is going on? Where did this come from? Or how about this one, last one. You have a big event. You got a big exam, a final, a recital, a big game, something you need to perform for, something you're excited for. The next day and the night before, you cannot sleep a wink. And the whole time you're thinking like, I gotta be my best, I gotta be sharp tomorrow, and you can't sleep at all. How frustrating is that? How many fingers did you put down? Anything else that you would add that you get frustrated about? All right, now we're going to develop this a little more to help us understand our own anger. So let's say our fingers represent level 1 anger in our lives. So this is what you're going to do. Just write a little 1 on each of your fingers, and that represents level 1 anger. And these are just little things that happen throughout the day that make you angry. So like when I was a kid, I have 9 younger siblings, but my little brother in particular, he always wanted to order whatever I would order. So if I was at Taco Bell, I want 2 tacos and a burrito. He'd be like, I want 2 tacos and a burrito. I'm like, you know what? Change that up. I'll have nachos. And he'll like, you know what? Never mind, I'll have nachos. And it's no big deal. Who cares? But for me, it was just so frustrating. Like, oh, stop copying me all the time. It's a level 1 anger thing. So these are all the little things that you get angry at throughout the day. And the question with level 1 anger is, do I own it? Do I own it? Do I own the things that make me angry? Do I realize, do I appreciate the fact that there are things that make me angry and I get angry? Because here's the thing. If you don't own it, if you don't understand that you have anger, then what you'll always do is blame it on other people. You'll say things like, I just speak my mind, or I wear my emotions on my sleeve, or everybody's always this. Have you met people like that? There's drama around them and it's like, well, it's everybody else. It's everybody else's fault. I just stand up for myself. I'm just a blunt person. If you don't own it, then nothing is ever your fault. And you'll always blame it on other people. And here's the other thing about owning it, is that it's a vulnerable position to own your anger, because you have to admit it, right? You have to admit, especially when it's a stupid little thing like somebody copying your order that you know you shouldn't be angry about. So you have to start out by owning it. Do I own these things? Do I appreciate that there are things that make me angry? And when you begin to own it, then that allows you to reconcile with other people. But there's a level 2 that goes deeper than just owning the level 1 anger things. So let's look at that. So level 2, we're going to put a level 2 right here on our palm. Just like that. Now level 2 are unforgiven offenses. So these are bigger things that people do to us, especially things that we've never forgiven, okay? And the question at level 2 that's so important to understand it is, what is the story I tell myself? What's the story I tell myself about what happened to me? So this is so important for helping you understand how it affects your life and what to do about it. So for example, when I was about 7 years old, I loved playing in the gym. I loved every gym game, balls, throwing them at people. And I remember we had these big game nights with church where we would play with other kids. And one night I was doing a game night, minding my own business, and these 2 girls that were like 4 or 5 years older walked by. They were talking, they were friends, and I overheard them say, "Isn't he ugly?" It's brutal, right? Isn't he ugly? Now, as a 6, 7-year-old, I didn't know what to do with that. And then I get to tell myself a story about that moving forward. So for instance, I could say, they were talking about me. They thought I was ugly. Maybe I am ugly. And then I could carry that and hold on to that and begin to hate myself or worry about it all the time, or just make that part of my identity that I always think that I'm some kind of ugly person. I could say, you know what, they were talking about me, but girls are just cruel, especially at that age, young girls. And so I'm not going to worry too much about it. Who really cares? I could say, they were probably talking about someone else. Like, I wasn't really friends with them. Maybe they were talking about someone at school, which, is not great that they're calling them ugly, but at least it's not me. I don't have to worry about it. Or I could say, you know what? My value is in God, how he sees me, how has he made me, so it really doesn't matter what a couple of girls call me when I was a little kid. It doesn't need to affect my identity or affect my life moving forward. But you see how that story impacts how that event affects our lives. And it pushes up into the level 1 anger, because if there's, for instance, for you guys, maybe there's a girl who does something really mean to you, right? It does something horrible, stabs you in the back, tells a story or something like that. If that goes unforgiven and you tell yourself a dangerous story about it, then what can happen is you can take it out on other girls in your life. You could take it out on your sister, you could take it out on your mom, you could take it out in these little frustrations that come out all the time. And the real problem is there was some girl who hurt you. Or it can go the other way around. It could be a girl and a guy breaks up with you, and it's super painful, and you thought you were a good couple, you thought you were awesome together, and he wanted to separate, and now you have this anger towards guys, and this about guys, and that about guys, and guys always act that way. And you can actually grow up, get married, and that level 2 thing can affect the relationship with your future husband, even with your sons, and you may not even know it. So what is the story you're telling yourself about that? And how can you tell a story that helps you to resolve the situation? I just heard a story about a guy who is in a wheelchair, bound to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And somebody asked him, like, isn't it horrible, isn't it hard to be stuck in this wheelchair, to be trapped by this wheelchair for the rest of your life? And the guy said, you know what, actually, it's amazing, because without a wheelchair, I'm stuck in my bed for the rest of my life. I can't go anywhere. And so this wheelchair actually sets me free. It gives me a life of freedom. You see how that different story changes everything? The wheelchair is freedom, and so I don't have to be depressed all the time that somehow I'm stuck. And so pay attention to that story you tell yourself about those level 2 offenses. My ink is already wiping off, so that's a good thing. It won't be permanent. The other cool thing about when you begin to dive into some of these level 2 things, and there might be things that you don't even know are there that have been affecting your level 1 anger, and you don't even know that there's someone who did something that you haven't forgiven. And so this is a great chance to pray and ask God, what are some things going on in my life? What are some things that have been offenses against me? What is the story I'm telling myself about these things? It's also a great opportunity to talk to a trusted, mature Christian in your life. If that's one of your parents or a guardian, your community group leader, I would love to talk to you about stuff like this, or just someone who's a mentor in your life that you can trust to begin to talk through, this is what happened, this is the story I tell myself, help me process this, help me forgive, help me let go of these things so that it doesn't affect my everyday life and how I treat people on a regular basis. And then there's a third thing that goes even deeper. So we're going to put a level 3 anger down here. This is like in the depth of our soul. And this is an anger towards God and life. And in level 3 anger, we get to a place where we hate life, where we're just mad at life in general, or mad at God. Sometimes we point at God. And the reason it happens is that we have this vision and expectation for how life should have gone, how we thought things should unfold. And guess what? Life never turns out the way we plan. It never turns out the way we envision and the way we hope. It's always a little different, and sometimes it's really different. So when life doesn't turn out the way that we hoped and expected, and we suffer loss or some unforeseen thing happens, we have to move away from our friends, we have to switch schools. There's all sorts of things that if somebody breaks up with us that we thought we'd be with maybe forever, that level 3 anger can sink in where it's like God is unfair, life is unfair. And the question you're asking at this point that is so important is, do I trust God? Do I trust God? And this is a tough question at this point. It's easy to trust God when things are going amazing, when life is going kind of how you hoped, how you thought it would unfold. But that's not how life always is. And when it takes that spin, when it gets really hard, when something unexpected happens, then in your heart of hearts, if you're not feeling close to God, if you're not feeling loved, if you don't think He's doing the things that He should be doing in your life, then the question becomes, do I trust Him anyways? Do I trust Him regardless of what life throws at me? And once again, there's a pattern here, is that if you're angry at God and angry at life, it will flow into situations like this where you don't want to forgive people. You want to tell the worst story about what happened to you, and you want to just own these terrible, destructive things that cause you to hate yourself. And then, of course, that flows out into all these little outbursts of anger all the time that just cause more regret and more frustration, not just with you, but with the people that you love. And so you have to take the time to figure out the answer to this question. Do I trust God? And if I trust Him, then suddenly I have the strength to forgive people that have wronged me and begin to tell a different story about who I am and how God made me to be. And then I have the peace and the confidence to begin to use anger and control it in the right ways and not be just annoyed and frustrated with all sorts of little things and people in my life. Now I want to finish with a poem. It's in the book of Habakkuk, chapter 3, verse 17. And this is a poem written by the prophet Habakkuk, and he's wrestling with a moment like this. And it's worse than anything we've ever been through. I mean, the whole country of Israel was attacked by a foreign power. An evil ruler was running the attack, and the nation's decimated, and Habakkuk's people are suffering, and they're dying, and they're starving. And he's looking at God, and he's like, what is going on? And this is what he writes in Habakkuk 3:17. He says, even though the fig trees have no blossom, and if there are no grapes on the vine, even though the olive crop fails and the fields lie empty, barren, even if the flocks die and the fields and the cattle barn are empty, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my salvation. The sovereign Lord is my strength. Now with all that farming and trees, like that's what they lived off of. That's what kept them alive. And so he's saying, even if the food dries up, even if the water dries up, even if there's nothing left and I don't know where my next meal is coming from, and if people are suffering around me, if everything goes wrong and not how I had hoped and not how I had planned, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to trust God. I'm going to hold tightly to God, and I'm going to just ride out things with God and trust that he's going to make things work in his time. That position that begins to heal this level 3 anger begins to change every area of anger in your life. And I hope that you have that moment, especially when you're going through trials, of just saying, I don't feel close to God. I don't like what's happening to me. I don't like that everything isn't turning out like I want, but I'm going to trust him anyways. I'm going to rejoice in him anyways. I'm going to worship him anyways and dig into his word anyways, no matter how I feel, and just let him begin to work on the deep levels of my heart, and then begin to work on what's been done to me, and then begin to make me a person who can control my anger. So I hope and pray that for you. And I want you to spend time thinking about this week, processing this, talking to people about some of these things in your life, talking to your siblings or your friends that know Jesus. And this is big stuff. This is stuff that can change the direction of your life. And so that anger doesn't become a destructive force that keeps coming back to destroy things that you love. So, hey, I love you guys. So thankful that you came to join us for this. And I can't wait to see you next week.